There we go. Welcome to, what is today? March 4th? Our March 4th Lifeboat Academy Coordination Circle. This is our second coordination circle, and so we are still in the process of transitioning from our previous incarnation, which was actually two separate meetings, which included a Monday update and a Tuesday planning session. And we're now more or less combining them both into this coordination circle. So part of what we'll be doing today is working through how the coordination circle works. And we're recording because we want to make sure that if people can't be here, they can catch up. And so the recording has started, and I was assuming that we would sort of start in the usual way of, well, actually, when I was getting ready for this meeting, I looked at our agenda for the old way that we used to do our planning sessions. And I think in the spirit of onboarding, I would like to share that. And I think it also can, it's a little bit of a refresher since we paused that process to do the annual planning stuff, to do the charrette work. And so actually going back and reminding ourselves of how it used to work could be quite interesting. And I've done a little bit of change already, but mostly I just changed the name from sprint planning agenda to coordination circle meeting agenda. And I thought it was interesting that when I went back in, I was reminded that we used to start by revisiting the big picture, by going around and what is it that we're here to do and why are we doing that as a way of orienting ourselves. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to continue that in the coordination circles. It could prove pretty useful. And then we looked at the annual and seasonal plans to figure out, again, big picture, what are we supposed to be focusing on now? We looked at the calendar to, in particular, see what was on the agenda for the week or 2 weeks. Then we prioritized next steps. And then we reviewed them to make sure that they were reasonable, doable, that we had the right things on the list. And then we created a sprint mantra. And as I was looking at this, I was thinking, moving to the guild system, that really the priorities and the task list and the double check are things that should happen in the guilds. So really the guilds are responsible for setting their priorities and then coming to the coordination circle and saying, here's what we're working on. And so really the work of this circle is just to look at if there are any potential conflicts or where there might be some opportunities for, getting more bang for the buck kind of thing. And likewise, a sprint mantra kind of seems like it may not be relevant at the coordination circle. But I did think it was interesting, maybe spending a little extra time on why bother? What are we here to do? And so I thought at the very least, just as a check-in, let's go around and to kind of split the difference. And we could go once around the circle and how do we see the coordination circle working? And what elements seem good to include, and what elements are something that we move over to the guilds to do. So I'm also on the heels of a 3-day retreat on sort of advanced circle keeping. And so I'm also in my mind now thinking it's an awfully business-oriented way of starting. And so I think actually I'd like to go back a step and say, let's start just with a land acknowledgement and just a moment of grounding through the land acknowledgement, and then an opportunity for us each to do a quick check-in. And would anyone like to do the land acknowledgement? I'm always happy to, but also creating the opportunity for others. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Ronnie, over to
I
you.
raised my hand at the very last second. Yeah, I just want to preface by saying I've been thinking a lot about land acknowledgements and what really is the purpose of them, what is the impact of them, and what kinds of tangible actions can we really integrate into the land acknowledgement, or rather having the land acknowledgement be tied to actual like things that people are going to be doing in their own communities, to support land back and indigenous sovereignty. So this is very much in the spirit for me of practice and investigation, curiosity. Um, yeah. So we start by acknowledging land themselves because the land has been here since long before we were here. The land will be here long after we are gone. And everything that we are and everything that we experience is because of the land, rises up from the land and returns to the land. And each of the lands that we occupy have very long histories, and those histories by and large include a lot of colonization and violence and theft of land and resources and displacement of peoples. And so each of us exists in the context of that history, and everything that we do to the land and with the land exists in the context of everything that has happened before now. And the lands that I currently occupy are the unceded territories of the Karankawa Indians and the Tonkawa peoples and the Coahuiltecan peoples, and have also been known to a bunch of other tribes, nomadic tribes such as the Waco, the Wichita, a bunch of others that I can't remember right now because I had a very long day. And I am actively engaging in communities that include Indigenous folks and support their sovereignty and their survival and their well-being, to the best of my ability. And as soon as I'm able to do more and do better, I will be doing that. So I just want to take a moment for each of us to feel our bodies being held to the land where we are through gravity. We are always, always, always on the land. As long as we are alive and breathing, we are on the land. We are held by the land. We are part of the land. The land is not separate from us. We are very deeply interconnected, and so much of this project is about that remembrance, that recognition that we are interconnected, and the importance of our actions and our efforts and our intentions in that realm. So deep gratitude to the many Indigenous cultures and peoples around the world who have managed to survive despite so much violence and so much against them, and continue to. I also acknowledge that colonization and imperialism and genocide of Indigenous peoples is very much ongoing and present. So our work is very far from finished. Back to you, Ben.
Yep. Thanks for that. And the circle as I see it today is April, Ronnie, Roland, and me. So let's just take a moment to go around and do a quick check-in. And actually, I'm going to steal one from the community justice meeting this morning, which is, where's your energy level at the moment? On a scale from 1 to 10, where would you peg yourself? April, over to you.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with all of you again. I've missed your faces. I haven't seen them for at least a week. That's a week too long. My energy level is at about a 4 at this point. So I'm looking forward to a restorative time, including food, and then I will soar into action again. Over to Ronnie.
I'm actually struggling to answer this question. I have I think I have two different energy levels happening. My physical energy is probably like a 5 or lower, but my spiritual, sort of like spiritual emotional vitality feels very high. It's maybe like 8 or 9. So that I can feel that is kind of feeding the physical, and it's an interesting dynamic. Over to Ramon.
My energy level is concordant with the tide of the day that I'm in, which is evening. And you can extrapolate what you'd like from that. So over to Ben. Part of the reason why I think this is an interesting question is that over the course of the day, I've been was low energy and I had a meeting that kind of bumped my energy up, and then I got busy doing things and then I kind of came down, and I think I'm probably at a solid 5, not too high, not too low, ready to kind of get some things done, but then ready to be done with the day. So in that spirit, let's go back to, let's go back to not that. Let's go back to our Asana. And now I'm going to ask the question that I asked the first time, which is I reviewed a little bit how we used to do it. And so thoughts on the best way of organizing the coordination circles moving forward. And I think in this, we're kind of doing gathering considerations, just top of your head, what feels like the most useful use of this time. And over to you, April. What feels like a useful and productive way of organizing this time for you?
For today, it would be to figure out kind of what the template will be, I guess, for the circle going forward. And is it a fully circle process or is it something else? And for the future, I think there's a number of things in the list of how things were that could be really useful. Including, I would include a mantra at the end. It might not be a sprint mantra, but I've really liked carrying a short term with me, a short phrase of words to help me stay knowing that I have to watch the compass, I guess. And that's it. Over to Ronnie.
I'm thinking about some aim, act, reflecting time. What were we doing before annual planning that was working well, that we want to bring forward into this new guild system? We've been in a transition time, and I feel like we're transitioning out of the transition time into, all right, this is how we want to do it. So yeah, kind of completing the cycle with aim, act, reflect. Over to Roland.
I agree with April it would be useful to start to think about the new format. And it occurs to me that for the coordination circle to be in service to the guilds, it's also to
it might, I'm not entirely sure how to do this, but how do we find out from the guilds what the guilds need from the coordination circle, and how does the coordination circle decide what it can do? And yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is more practical, just looking at the calendar and how we have things set up currently, as we transition from the whatever we called it before, the to this new system. So over to Ben.
Yeah, I think you know, in sociocracy terms, the way that I think this is a good reminder. This is the coordination circle. It is the guilds that we are to be in service to the guilds, and that information comes to the coordination circle through the caretakers and through the links. So part of that is anyone is invited to join the coordination circle. So I'm assuming, I guess this is, I'm going to put it out there. I'm assuming that we would do a little bit of agenda setting at the beginning of the meeting, like we normally do, where we go around and we find out what's on people's lists. So that also gives an opportunity for what the guilds need to come forward. And I think I am assuming that this does also serve the purpose of kind of the weekly update. So hearing from the guilds, hearing from the caretakers, here's what's going on in the guild, here's questions that we have. And I guess it's two things, or three things: what we've been up to in the guild, what we're planning to do, and whatever questions or what's the help we need from the coordination circle. So I think that's an expectation of the caretakers to bring that forward. Yeah, and let's just keep going around to see if there's anything else now that we've each had a chance to share, so we can keep going. Over to you, April.
I think it is really important to start the circle well in the way that we've done today. There's real reasons for doing that. So I would like to see that at the beginning as we come together. And over to Ronnie.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting really clear on the communication channels. So guilds are deciding things amongst themselves, and the caretaker says, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the coordination circle. And then the coordination circle is reporting out. I'm thinking about tying that to the weekly email. So coordination circle reports based on, you know, highlights for each guild or whatever's happening. That goes into the weekly email. So then when I'm writing that, I already know, or whoever's doing it, they already know what's going in there. And then everybody gets to hear about what's been going on. So everybody's kind of collectively generating what's being shared out. Over to Roma.
So in terms of today's focus, I think I've said my piece. Are we starting to process other things?
I think it's just a last chance. If there's anything else to add, if you're good, you're good.
I'm good.
Yeah, I think I am too. And I feel like we kind of have come up with the template here. If we readjust these, we want to make sure that we start off in a good way. So we want to start off with some grounding and some land acknowledgement and making sure that we're present. There's going to be a space in there for caretakers to do reports, which will be gathered, and that will form the basis for the weekly email. there'll be agenda setting in that where caretakers or others can bring questions for discussion, and we can do that the same way. We'll prioritize based on you know, what feeling into that. And that we will try to come up with some sort of mantra. I like what you're saying, you know, it's nice to have like a North Star. It's nice to have something to sort of keep us focused and to bring that back in. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. So that seems like the shape of it. And I like, actually, I really like the AMAC Reflect part 2 of, actually, let's do a quick round on that, because I feel like we probably have captured a lot of what was working, but just in that spirit of AMAC Reflect, is there anything that we were doing before that seemed to be working quite well that we want to make sure that we carry forward? April, any AMAC reflection?
We may want to make it a bit explicit sometimes, AMAC Reflect, and by naming it, and then by making sure it's included in each circle somehow. We do it implicitly, I believe, but I think it's really helpful as one of those timely reminders. And it reminds me that actually, yeah, right, there is a core to this process. Over to Ronnie.
Well, I agree about the high level question, because also keeping in mind that the people in the coordination circle meetings might be changing, people coming sometimes and not other times. So it gives people that grounding point and reminder of what's going on, especially if they're new to the project. And just generally, I think it's good for everyone. I think reviewing the annual and seasonal plan is really good. Reviewing the calendar is great. And then we talked about guilds are more going into the nitty-gritty of priorities. But maybe in the coordination circle, each guild takes from what's being discussed, okay, we need to focus on this. So they could name that. What's your top priority for the week or for the 2 weeks or whatever? And then they report back to the guilds and make sure everyone's on board with that. That's what I have. Over to Roman.
That all sounds good to me. I have nothing to add. Over to Ben.
Yeah, it sounds good to me too. And the AMAC Reflect, I was something we'll probably talk about, I'm hoping we'll talk about, which is the onboarding and the sociocracy aspect of it. And I was reviewing the onboarding materials for sociocracy, and one of the things they actually do is they separate out retrospectives from planning meetings. And so in the planning, there's always AMAC Reflect, but being more intentional, like if there's a big project, if there's a big event, if there's a big whatever, like you're saying, April, kind of calling it out and saying we should do a retrospective, you know, we should finish that AMAC Reflect loop. I think that's great. And yeah, I think this feels wholesome and complete. So let's go through the motions of the first ones, and let's do a quick round on why are we doing this anyhow? What are we trying to accomplish? Why does it matter? Where are we now? And just also a reminder, you can always pass. And just because I'm aware, April, I'm going to you as the first person each time. So you can always pass. And big high level, why are we here? April, over to you. And also you can answer any one of these questions or all 3 of these questions, whatever feels right for you.
Well, we are continuing to launch the Lifeboat Academy, and we are moving in a transitional way from an initial way of working into one that includes and encompasses more people and more assets. And so keeping the best parts of what has happened and sorting out some things we might not have to do any longer is kind of a very effective thing at this point. Why does this matter? It matters so that we can remain motivated and continue to have momentum. And so that we can share what it is that we've learned from up to this point, up to this transitional point. Where are we now? We're in the beginning parts of a transition. And depending on which theory of transition you follow, it's, you know, probably about to get quite confusing. So having a bit of a template and having a chance to talk about the steps of the template is a good thing, I believe, at this point. Over to you, Ronnie.
We are developing the framework for the Lifeboat Academy. Actually, we're developing the framework for the Lifeboat Network, so that it can support anyone who is interested in connecting and learning and growing around personal and collective resilience. And it matters because building networks that function well will be really helpful as we are facing more and more symptoms of collapse and climate change. And where are we now? We have fleshed out our guild structure and our annual plan, and we are moving into the new rhythm of the guilds and the coordination circle, and including new people in that process as well. Over to Roland.
What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to connect the dots. There's lots of dots and they're always moving, and it's like I'm just seeing the Kumu map in my mind. Something new comes in, or a new realization comes in, and everything goes boing, 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 and shifts.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do that collectively. And why that matters specifically is that we can see more if we can work together. And if we can see more, then we can act more effectively. Because that matters because we are entering uncharted territory for the human species with the changes that are happening. There's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety around what's coming. There's all sorts of information that's coming in. How can we weather that? How can we weather that well? Because that's all we can do. And where are we now? We are in we're in the thick of it. We are trying to face things to the best of our abilities, we're trying to be honest with ourselves about what we're seeing and trying to communicate it, so that we can be working together more effectively and supporting each other more effectively. Because this is this the right word? A polyvalent experience that we're all having.
Mhm.
So over to Ben.
Ah. Yep. I kind of feel like yeah, I think what we are trying to accomplish together is, well, everything that we've all said, and that's a culture shift. We are trying to heal, we are trying to decondition ourselves from habitual ways of working that maybe don't serve very well anymore. And so it's as much about how we are with each other as about the tangible things on the ground, but the tangible things on the ground are essential to how we work well with each other. Why does it matter? I think I can't say it any better. It's, you know, we're in the thick of it, and it matters because being able to work well together is the only thing that will get us through. And where are we now? I think I'm keenly aware of the fact that we are onboarding new people. And I think that speaks a little bit to the confusion of, you know, transitioning. And so on figuring out how to onboard people, and it's the both and of, we have developed systems. I think this is one of the challenges of onboarding that hopefully we'll get to talk about. But we have systems in place that we have tested that are, you know, several versions into it that work well, and we're open to them being improved. But we're not starting with a blank piece of paper, and we're not starting over. And it is incumbent on people who want to get involved to bring themselves up to speed with what we have been doing to then be able to make improvements. So we're open to the improvements, but first we need to get people up to speed on understanding where we are now, to be able to make effective additions. Cool. So that we've done our the revisiting our big goal, and I think I guess to go over to the annual plan, it's so recent, I'm not really sure that we need to revisit it by looking at it. I stand to be corrected there, but you know, I think where we are right now is we have an enlarged circle of people who are interested. We have a growing level of interest in what we're doing, and the high points of the plan are to bring on new farmers onto the property to help with the food farm and housing, the physical aspects. The legal and finance is to secure, you know, to create the legal entity and secure the purchase of the property so that we have a stable base of operations. The heart work and philosophy guild is really about being the keeper of the agreements. I loved Becca's, the kind of the vibes watcher of what we're doing, and making sure that we are engaging and improving our understanding of how we work well with each other. And governance and principles at this point is really focused on the onboarding. And then outreach and network is really thinking about how do we manage that, the Venn diagram and the permeable boundary of what's happening here on Sedaeus, on South Pender, and how we stay linked with, so what's happening in the anchor of the lifeboat network and the fleet of lifeboats, and orienting with the individual lifeboats. And yeah, so in a sense, I feel like our restatement of the guilds is kind of our annual plan. I think it speaks to, these are the key functions that we've identified for now, for this year. And with that, I will pass it around. That's my quick review on the annual plan. And in terms of the seasonal plans, where we are is actually the guilds are in the process of deciding what their seasonal plans are, being able to turn that general vision into something more concrete. So once around to see if there's anything to add in terms of the annual plan or seasonal plan. April, over to you.
Nothing to add for me. Over to Ronnie.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a very apt description. Over to Roland.
That was great, Ben. I have nothing to add. Back to you.
Cool. All right. So now let's go over to the calendar, and there are a couple things to talk about there. All right. So here we have our calendar. We have scheduled now the tentative meetings, regular meetings of outreach and network, principles and governance, and the coordination circle. And then next week, Heartwork and legal, or financial and legal, with the coordination circle. And so those are tentatively set until further notice. And so one of the questions that has come up is around, and as I mentioned, I think that the coordination circle replaces what was our Tuesday planning meeting and our Monday update meeting. So I just went ahead and removed the Monday update from the calendar. We still have co-working times on the calendar, and we probably still want co-working times, but when those happen is an open question. And in terms of the practicalities of the calendar, I did notice that we have a navigation session scheduled for Wednesday. And so that is probably something that we want to go out in the email, and also separately to the people that have expressed interest in the navigation sessions. So that's the quick view of the calendar. And with that, once around questions or comments, over to you, April.
I'm just trying to read the little boxes here.
Let's see if I can. I think I have to stop my share. Let me try. No, there we go. Is that better?
Yeah. So is it proposed that there's office hours once a week? Tuesdays?
Right now, we actually have it 4 times. Well, the last time we promoted them, we said Tuesday through Friday, 10 to 11:30. And then, except that gets changed when there's a navigation session, which happens in that same slot.
So are office hours the same as co-working?
Yeah, and that's, again, this is part of the evolution. We started off with them being co-working time and office hours, so people could sign up and we would be available for questions. And so that's an open question. Are they Are they office hours for people to drop in to ask questions? Are they co-working time? How do we want that to work?
And I'm wondering how much of each activity happened, how often,
Yeah.
and is that liable to change now that we have more people involved?
Mhm.
So those are my questions. On to Ronnie.
I've been thinking about going back to calling them office hours because one of the things that came up during the charrette planning stuff was um, sort of what's the funnel for how people get in touch with us, and then we say, oh, you can talk to us directly, ask questions, then whatever you need. So office hours are that relational time for people to bring whatever they want to work on, which is also co-working time for
Mhm.
anybody, right? So any of us could have something that we need to work on, want to work on together, and office hours are the time to do that. And I think that having them more often is good. That means people can access them more, are more likely to be able to attend. I don't know about having it at the same time every day. We used to have some at different times, but that also kind of gets confusing and makes people's schedules kind of made more hectic, maybe. So I think we could do some, yeah, those are some considerations for that. I have one more thing. Well, and also just being clear in our messaging. You can also schedule an office hour by appointment. You can schedule a meeting by appointment. And here's the link to do that. So that we're definitely, we're available for people as needed. Yeah, over to Roland.
Go ahead, Roland.
Sorry, my internet, I didn't hear my name because the internet keeps cutting in and out. That's why I was sort of like, is it my turn? Well, so I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who is sort of coming into this fresh. And when we say people can use office hours to talk to us, who's us? And actually, what is co-working time? How is that used in this new configuration? Um, you know, yeah. So who's meeting who for to do what during these times? And I think there's also this assumption that office hours means likely is with the 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 distances in which people find themselves from the campus here. Um, so what does that look like? I just have a lot of questions. It's not clear to me um, what this new way, because and the other thing too is that originally the office hours was to make time available for people who were interested in either investing or in being interns. And now we have a group of people who are in getting involved in working on projects. So yeah, I have a lot of questions. I don't have any answers. Um, I'm yeah, so I'm just repeating yeah a lot. So I'm going to pass to Ben.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of the co-working time, because I think that that's a really good question. Who's going to be co-working? And as we're moving things more towards the guilds, a lot of this we would imagine is going to happen at the guild level, right? So the co-working time is really about guild people. And the advantage, though, I'm thinking of having like office hours is having sort of identified times that people might be available so that it's easier to schedule time. You know, like it's having it, it's sort of like a standing meeting that's easier to cancel than to schedule. So if we needed for some reason to do, well, and I guess there is going to be also some hive mind work. We used to have hive mind meetings where, and I'm thinking about this as sort of an outgrowth of the coordination circle. Like, how do we deal with tensions that arise that are broader tensions,
Yeah.
or where there's overlap? So maybe that's it. Maybe it's not having multiple co-working times, but having a couple tension time, like a hive mind times. And so then that becomes, if there's nothing to work through, no biggie, but it gives a little bit of a focus around what we would be using that time for. And then, and the office hours actually, well, so, and that's where the Calendly setup, it's really easy for me, if people want to schedule office hours with me, it's simple because we can just set them, and then the us in who you're talking to is me. And there's a way that we could set up Calendly so that we could actually have it be any of us or one of us or some combination of us, but then we'd have to pay for that upgraded service. And I think that would be, and Calendly's not especially cheap per seat. So, the bringing in more people brings it up pretty quick. But that would still, I think that's still with the office hours, that's not a hard thing, really. I mean, we could internally just sort of, people could schedule the time. If we could agree on times and know that I think the most important thing is just that somebody can cover that time. So we could agree to the times, add up whatever times we would be available individually, make that the office hours, treat that as a sort of, even though it might have my name on it, it's still something that gets, sort of hived out to people. That might be an option. And I guess I'm also wondering about how much time we want to spend on this right now. And what's good enough for now, safe enough to try. So yeah, I think I'll pass. Let's do one more round at least, and then see if we can settle on something in one more round. So April, over to you.
Okay, I'm not sure that I have anything to comment about this, but I am wondering, of everything, where does the system oversight happen? Where are the people that look at the whole system looking at it? Is that principles in governance, or is that coordinating circle?
It's there's a Sociocracy answer. It's Stewardship Council and Coordinating Circle. And generally the coordinating circle has that responsibility in the operations realm, and the Stewardship Council acts as the sort of high level view. And so, yeah, so that's handled. And the idea with the seasonal plan is that Stewardship Council is coming together at least seasonally to look at that high level, are we still moving in the same way, with the recognition that because the coordination circle is operational, its operations can, get diverted because of the day-to-day stuff. So that's why the Stewardship Council then provides that additional oversight on the coordination circle.
And are there particular ways to look at the system? I mean, are we doing it now? Is that what it's about?
The way of doing it is aim, act, reflect periodically, where you pause and say, are we on the, where do we want to be heading? Are we on the right course? What's working, what's not? So yeah, that's the gist of it.
So that's where you would bring up if there's themes emerging or trends emerging or questions that take a while to sort of build. That would be the coordinating circle.
Well, and I think also that's where navigating via tensions comes up. And this is where it gets a little tricky because tensions will arise at multiple scales. So some of the tensions, and we've had experience with that, where some of the tensions are very high level and they kind of go on in the tension hopper, and we look at them and we don't answer them. But then eventually they kind of get worked out. And then some of them are more, sort of mundane tensions that just, you're kind of fixing the part that's broken kind of thing, greasing the wheel. So in the theory, at least, I think that's all. The idea is that being able to unearth the tensions, and coupled with the periodic retrospective and aim, act, reflecting, is creating the space where whatever those are, they come up, and then they're collectively processed. So I'm sorry to break circle there. I just thought those were kind of, that's the sociocracy answer. And then of course the reality is we make it work for us. So if there's anything that we need to do to make sure that that's accounted for, then we can do that.
Okay. Over to Ronnie, I think.
So I think having a standing, what I'm hearing is there's office hours time potentially for people who have questions, people who are being onboarded who want to ask some questions, people who have just heard about us and want to talk about their project. Those are the kinds of things we've wanted to offer all along. That's also where some mentorship opportunity comes in. There's also, I think it's a good idea to have standing time for tensions, hive mind stuff. Doesn't have to be used necessarily, but having a time where we've already said, okay, tension is presented in coordination circle, great, Thursday at 2, or that's when it goes, Thursday at 5, we can talk about that. So there's immediately a slot and people have that open if possible. I don't think we need to have office hours as I just defined them every day or even 4 days a week. I think even twice a week, 2 different times that we offer, and people can also schedule a separate meeting if they want to. And I'm also thinking back to when we were talking about sort of integrating the help desk and kind of like if someone emails and they say, hey, I want to schedule a time to talk about this, we can delegate that out, say, hey, who wants to take this meeting? It doesn't have to be them. Who's available to talk to this person, or who would like to team up and do that. So leaning into sort of the team for those kinds of things. Also, I think we need to have a stewardship council meeting.
Yeah.
I think it's time.
Mm-hmm.
I've just realized that. The council earlier. Those are my thoughts. Over to Roman.
I stopped my video because the internet keeps coming in and out, and sometimes I miss big parts. So hopefully this will help. I was just thinking about what Ben was saying about high level stuff goes on the hive mind, and eventually it gets shaken out. I think this might be one of them. I think keeping some space open to see how it wants to be used is probably a good thing to do, at least in the short term. And for anyone involved who is watching this, we could do a gathering considerations on how to use those times also, so that it's because
Yeah.
again, in thinking about the change in how we're doing things, where it's not the coordinating team that's making decisions, but it is the guilds working and collaborating and making obvious what's needed, and also just through the guild's work, finding out what the guild needs. So keeping the space open, gathering considerations, letting things shake themselves into something that works for everyone. So yeah, over to Ben.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I'm hearing I think there's sort of two kinds of office hours. There's the drop-in office hours will be around at this time if anybody wants to chat. And then there's the schedule a time. Because the schedule a time stuff is really simple. Like, I mean, that's it. Most people aren't using the time, so we can make a lot of time available and it's just not going to get used. If we have standing hours where so if no one books the time, then you can book the time, you use the time for other things. But if we're going to have like a drop-in office hours, then we've got to be there. Or keep that open for people to drop in. And the reality is this kind of goes back to your thing, April. No one really took us up on the drop-in times. So I think what I am leaning towards is we can easily offer the book a time if you want to talk to someone, and we can just figure out what those times are. And like Ronnie's saying, then that gets delegated out to whoever the best person is or is available. And then what I'm hearing is we should pick a time or two that we have hive mind time. I think that just makes a lot of sense so that we can actually, well, first of all, we already have a bit of a backlog of little tensions that are, backing up. And but also I think to be able to be responsive if something happens, we don't have to wait and worry about scheduling. It can just be like, okay, that goes on that time. And those tensions could be like the hive mind time could be a coordination issue, or it could be one of these kind of standing tensions. It could be like heart work and principals need to hash out who takes on which part of a conflict resolution scenario, something like that. So then we can schedule them. I think that makes a lot of sense that we should pick a time that we have that's hive mind time. And I double down on what Roland said. I think really at this point, let's make some space available, see how people use it, and just know that that's something that we can revisit. And the Stewardship Council, I had been thinking about the summit, or sorry, I'd been thinking about the charrette as being in essence the work of the Stewardship Council. But I think you're right. I think it makes sense that we should specifically, bring in and identify who considers themselves part of the Stewardship Council. So yeah, let's put that on as a to-do item. So I guess basically thumbs up if it sounds like the action items here are we're going to find a time to schedule a standing hive time meeting, and we will figure out what office hours we want to offer in terms of a sign up for if you have a question, and then that we can use Calendly for that, and then we'll just delegate it out. And we'll schedule a Stewardship Council meeting. So good. All righty. Cool. Well, we're at the end of the hour, but I was hoping that we could also talk about, and in terms of reports from the guilds, I think there's really only one guild that has a report, which is the finance and legal. And in some ways, the report back there is pretty straightforward because it's building on what we've done. There's a trajectory there. Becca has already engaged the lawyers for establishing the legal entity. And we have agreed that we're going to, not to go into too much detail, but in terms of the legal structure, there are maybe a half a dozen variables that we need to make decisions about, including things like what happens, what are there limits on dividends paid to investors? Are there limits on what happens if we dissolve the company and how the assets are distributed? Things like that. And I'm in the process of putting together here's our position on these variables, so that when we meet with the lawyers, we can just say, this is what we want, and then can that be done? So that's moving forward. And then the other thing that's moving forward is we're moving forward on the social mortgage part. And so that's all kind of normal. And the other part is the onboarding aspect. And that's where in the conversation around finance and legal's onboarding, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is probably just for everyone, including not just new members to what we're doing, but even some of our existing partners. Like, Becca and Heather kind of came on before we really had onboarding, and we've been meeting and talking about all this stuff. So there's things that are going on that they haven't been fully onboarded to. So that was in the Slack channel I put out. There are a couple elements of onboarding that I think might be useful for us to do at the coordination level, like at the coordination circle. And so I'm looking for feedback on, and I'll put a new task in here. I'll just call it onboarding. So I guess let's do a kind of a gathering considerations around the generic onboarding. And the things that I put in the Slack channels are Asana, Slack, Sociocracy 101, and our already established onboarding. So we have, and Asana and Slack and Sociocracy and actually Asana and Slack are part of our onboarding process. Like, we have electronic onboarding level 1 and electronic onboarding level 2, and those cover Slack and Asana. So one of my questions is what's the most efficient way, I guess, of doing onboarding at this point, where we have a number of new people who could all use some onboarding. And we've gotten into a fairly good habit of doing a Zoom call that we record, and then we make the recording available. And I'm thinking we could do a lot there where we can do one session with people who are available at the same time. I think the more people that we have, more actual people we have who can ask questions, the better the feedback. And so I guess one of the questions is what kinds of packets do we want to put together? Do we want to try to cover everything? Are there just a few things that we want to cover? So that's one of my questions. And the other thing is the Sociocracy 101. I already have a prepared PowerPoint that I've never done, but I went through it. It's all based on Sociocracy 3.0's resources. And actually what April, you and I put together as part of the action network that we were, the pre-Sociocracy version of what we were pitching. And it still looks really good, and it covers all of the, the basics. And I think it's probably it's 30 slides, so it's probably an hour workshop. And I know I just had a community justice meeting this morning. Sociocracy came up, and I offered to do it for that group, and there was a lot of interest there. So, yeah, I guess that's as much of a background, or as I think that's as much of background as you need. So let's just go through gathering considerations, questions, comments, ideas. Anything's good for the cause. So April, over to you.
Well, I think in terms of delivering this to people, that we should break it into separate sessions. I think Asana and Slack should be the first thing. And I think there should be some practical examples of like using it on the spot. And then I think Sociocracy 101 should be a probably 1 hour workshop. And I'm happy to work on that with you, or to co-deliver it, or whatever makes sense. And then maybe after we do that a couple times, we can check and see how that's going for everybody. See who actually retains the knowledge, because there's two things that need to happen with the Sociocracy stuff. Needs to be the understanding of the basic theory and definitions of each bit, and then there needs to be the actual application that's happening here, without turning it into a big you're not doing it the way you're supposed to kind of a session. You know, not having a whole bunch of quibbling time as part of it. And then the onboarding process itself, it feels to me a bit like it needs to be a separate piece. And I have to say, I don't necessarily know all the steps to onboarding, because I never got onboarded either, except, you know, by the by, I've slipstreamed my way in by, you know, being in the following other people's process or progress through onboarding. So I'm not sure if that needs to be like an hour or half an hour, or what. And is that something, can you actually do examples as part of that, or does it need to be that stuff gets delivered and then you come back and talk about it in terms of the guilds, in terms of operationalizing it, or what?
Just crept out. I have company now.
My internet was so bad, I haven't really been able to follow for like the last 10 minutes, that I decided I'd just go down.
Okay.
It was the best 10 minutes too.
I bet. That's
What can I say? Anyway, that's what I'm thinking off the top of my head. Over to Ronnie.
So for Asana and Slack, we could integrate some of that onboarding with the coordination meetings. I'm thinking, so like beginning of one meeting, you know, next week we'll do 30 minutes of Slack, because the coordination circle is going to be using Slack and Asana. The caretakers definitely, probably more than other guild members. So we could do 30 minutes of each as part of a coordination circle meeting. That's also an incentive for people to come to the coordination circle meetings. Potentially, that's one idea of how to do that. And then I also think with onboarding, sending out an email or something to everyone who's joined a guild, explicitly say, you need to be onboarded. You know, there's 3 different levels, at least, you know, level 1, you know, we're going to do a workshop at this date and time. If you can make it, great. If not, please watch the recording and you can sign up for a time to ask questions or something like that. So just starting to put the bug in everyone's ear, like we really we ask that you do this and take it seriously. We're available for questions. Because again, we're always running into the issue of scheduling. So however we can make sure things happen, record it, make it available, and then be available for questions after. I think that's been working well. So maybe we could continue doing that. Over to Roland.
I think the scheduler that you found, Ronnie, is awesome. And I want to use it all the time. And I think that, you know, I think for this kind of thing, it's a perfect way to use it. And so the recordings, great, using the scheduler, great. And I'm also thinking that we have made this optional for people to use Slack and to use Asana. So there's also that and how that works. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. So part of what I wasn't really able to hear, but I think you were saying, Ben, is that we talked about the need for onboarding during the finance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which totally makes sense, and it just is an opportunity to make the onboarding experience richer, you know, richer and more specific to people's interests. You know, as they move into the anyway. Yeah, and with our experiences, we know, and I'm just stating the obvious, that onboarding is really important, and when you skip it, things go wrong. So that's all I have to say. So to you, Ben.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to mix it with the coordination circle just because, you know, I hopefully the coordination circle chart starts to be about coordination, and then I get your point that it's kind of, it is. I guess that my only consideration is time conflict. It makes sense, and I worry about trying to put too much into the same meeting. But so it sounds to me like what we could do, and Slack and Asana are optional. I think we can talk about it not being optional for a caretaker. Especially Asana. I think Slack I think is optional. And actually there's been fairly good uptake on both Slack and Asana from the first invitation. But so I think with this, my hesitation about the onboarding that we developed is it's very farm centric. And so we'd have to go through and figure out which parts of the onboarding are only for people who are going to be on the farm. But I think Slack and Asana are obvious. Sociocracy is pretty obvious. I would like to keep, just because I've got two audiences in mind, I think I want to keep Sociocracy 101 free from, I think we can do, here's how we do it at the Lifeboat Academy as an example, but it's not about how we do it. It's kind of just examples. I think there's a huge appetite out there for a basic sociocracy, you know, kind of thing. So what I am proposing based on what we're saying is that we send out an email to our whole list, not just for people who have expressed an interest in the guild, to say, if you're in the guild, if you want to be part of a guild, we encourage, I don't want to get into wordsmithing. What I was thinking is we send out, broadly speaking, if you're interested in being onboarded on Sociocracy, Asana, or Slack, fill out the scheduler, and we'll be doing a session on each of those things. And if you can't make it, they'll be recorded and we're available for questions. So then we don't have to get everyone at the right time. We just have to figure out, and I think we can even do it differently than the standing meetings. I think we can just say, over the next 2 weeks, pick a couple times. Do any of these times work for you? And hopefully there'll be enough people that'll be interested that we can just do it. And keep it simple. Like I was really, for Asana, I was only going to show like what we do with Asana. And then take questions. And yeah, I think I'm fading. So how does that sound, April, over to you?
That sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Over to Ronnie.
That sounds good. And I'm wondering if I could just include that in the weekly email, which I did draft. I did draft it just before this meeting. So I was going to include the updated guild meeting schedule, asking people to fill out the scheduler if they want to be onboarded to those 3 different sessions. And I'm also wondering if we want to say anything yet about office hours or just post the Calendly link for people to sign up for times. That might be the easiest for now.
Yeah, I think, yeah, sorry.
That's all, and that's all I have. Over to Rolon.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, I think the Calendly link, because what we can do is just say if you want to sign up for time, because then we can adjust, it's a live link, right? So we don't even have to tell, it's like check for our availability, and then we just we can make any changes. We don't have to worry about changing when the office hours are. Cool. All right. Well, I feel like we have gone through everything. So just one last, any outstanding issues, questions, concerns, April?
No. Over to Ronnie.
Are people okay if the email goes out tomorrow morning instead of tonight? Okay, because I'd like to finish drafting it by tomorrow morning and just get a review from people, and then I can send it out.
Yeah. I think you can note, we'll be changing the schedule for when the email goes out because it'll follow on the coordination meeting, right? Because that's caretakers again, right? So there'll be a new schedule, and we could even, if you want, we could make it Wednesday so that yes, I think totally it's fine if it goes out tomorrow, and we can note that we'll be having a new schedule for the email based on coordination circle.
And
Okay.
according to research on the best time to send out newsletters, Wednesdays and Thursdays are the top days of the week to do it. So
Cool. I think it's over to you.
Oh,
Anything else?
no.
All right. Cool. I think we are good to go. So thanks for being here, and I will post this. And it's weird I keep having to remember that it's more than just us who are going to be watching this, and people are watching. I keep looking at our YouTube stats, and everything we post, we have people watching, so hi everybody.
Hi.
My mom watches, I know it.
Yeah.
She's
All
great
right.
about that.
Okay, well, we'll see y'all about. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.